Welcome to Straight Guy Queer Eye. I'm your host, Paul Yen. This is episode 13, or if you are superstitious, episode 14. I'm just kidding, it's episode 13. And apologies if there is a sound difference, but I screwed up and accidentally erased the intro, so this is the new intro. We always start off with an important ethics statement. I want to acknowledge that being straight gives me privileges that the queer community does not get. I will never fully understand the trauma, the drama, and all the other homophobic nonsense that queer folks deal with on a day-to-day basis, and I never will. I am not an expert in queer culture. I'm also not a therapist, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, or a doctor. As host of the Straight Guy Queer Eye podcast, I'm here to introduce people to shows that I love and enjoy. More importantly, I'm here to listen and to learn about the queer community, and I hope to pass that knowledge on to like-minded people who want to make some sort of difference in the queer community, their own community, and in their own lives. No corrections this week, but I did want to point out that a prominent GOP donor was sentenced to 21 years for child sex abuse. The guy's name is Anton Lazaro. And I only point this out because nowadays we're hearing a lot from the right that drag queen story hour, that the trans community are groomers and pedophiles and all sorts of nonsense, really. And I just find it funny that it's often people on the right or prominent people in the GOP that are the ones being caught doing this stuff. I'm not saying it's only people who are Republicans or whatever. Child sex abuse doesn't know any sort of political lines. There could be people from the Democrat side. There could be people from Republican side. There can be people who are independent, whatever. It knows no bounds. So, to accuse people on the left of being groomers and pedophiles, it's pretty sad and pathetic. So instead of focusing your energy and fear-mongering within, a specific political party, why don't you focus that energy on trying to find people who are actual child sex abusers or child groomers or whatever? I just haven't heard of any sort of arrests, indictments, or anything like that towards drag queens or from the drag community or the queer community. Anyways, 8 queens remain. Sonique was sent home in last week's episode of RuPaul's Drag Race Season 2. Sonique's parting lipstick message was the peace symbol followed by a heart. She signed her name, then wrote trust. So peace and love, trust? Trust and peace and love? I guess that's what she's trying to say. The mini challenge for the week, it's a wrap party, as in W-R-A-P party, as in the queens have 30 minutes to wrap plain white boxes the way they do with themselves on the runway. Ru calls it queenifying their boxes, using gift wrap that's provided plus pieces from their own drag wardrobe and something that belongs to one of their fellow queens. The queen with the prettiest box wins the mini challenge. We won't make too much out of this. My top boxes were, and in no particular order, Ravens. It's basically all black. The wrapping paper, the bow, the decorations. There was a black crow on it, and I think she got it from Jujubee. It's very fitting for Raven, and I dig it. Second was Jujubee. She had gold wrapping with pink decorations. She used one of the other queen's perfumes and sprayed it onto the box. So it was a scented box. And my third favorite was Tatiana's. It was turquoise wrapping with hot pink bows and a diamond borrowed from Jujubee. My least favorite boxes were Morgan McMichael's. It just had too much going on. It even had a Ken-looking doll on top of it, which I think is funny because this was in 2010, but Barbie recently came out. Anyways, the second least favorite was Tyra. Hers was also gold, just like Jujubee's, but it was just super sloppy. And my third least favorite was Jessica Wilde. Hers was a mess too, although it was sweet that she had a picture of her mama on it. So the winner? Raven. Ru says he's going to embrace his dark side because it's Raven's box. Ru then asks them to open the boxes, and there's an invitation inside each of their boxes inviting them to their own weddings, which is the Maxi Challenge. They will be dressing up as a bride with a wedding dress that is provided along with materials that they can use to customize the dresses. But the kicker is that they will also be dressing themselves up in a tuxedo to present their best boy drag. So essentially, they will be marrying themselves, or as Raven puts it, they're combining the feminine and masculine qualities of themselves to make one amazing wedding. And the look will be photographed. Because Raven won the mini challenge, she gets to pick her wedding dress first. Not only that, but she also gets to pick the order for the rest of the queens to pick out their wedding dresses. So after Raven picks her dress from, I want to say it's like 15 dresses or so, the order is as follows. First, she picked Morgan McMichaels. Of course, they're best friends in the competition. Second is Jujubee, who thought that she should have been first because she loaned the Raven to, or the crow or whatever the bird was, to Raven. But she's not. She's second. Third is Sahara. Fourth is Jessica Wilde. Fifth is Tyra Sanchez, sixth is Pandora Box, and seventh is Tatiana. Note, I want to say that when Ru releases the Krakens to grab their accessories, they all rush to grab the provided materials, and Tyra blocks the other queens by pulling the cart or the hanger that is holding the leftover dresses to block them, which is super shady and dirty. So Tatiana pushes the cart of dresses onto Tyra. A separate note, Jujubee points out that Raven and Morgan McMichaels keeps picking each other first or giving each other advantages, sort of an alliance, if you will. And I'm pointing that out because this is the first time in RuPaul's Drag Race where we see an alliance formed, even though they didn't specifically say it. This is where we see strategies change in upcoming seasons. But I wanted to point this out because it's the first. I mean, there's no rule against it. It's an advantage for sure, but it can also be a disadvantage, which we will also see in future seasons. So in the workroom, as the queens are cutting, sewing, and customizing their wedding dresses, which is really cool to see, by the way, because Ru said he doesn't want the dresses to look like they're off the rack, so the queens have to cut up the dresses and come up with a concept for their runway look. Anyway, Ru brings in a guest while the queens are working. His name is Matthew Anderson, spelled Matthu. He's a professional makeup artist who's worked on the likes of Beyonce, Janet Jackson, and of course, RuPaul himself. Ru and Matthew go around to each queen as Matthew gives tips to each of the queens on how they can improve their makeup. I won't go into details because you don't want to hear me describe makeup to you. But Tyra got the most praise from him, which I'm sure went to her head, while Tatiana got the worst critique, it seems. He did say that Tatiana's beautiful, but that her makeup is all over the place. So at one point in the workroom, the queens are getting dressed in their groom outfits, and Tyra, Sahara, Tatiana, and Pandora are also painting on facial hair. Tyra felt like they were all copying her, so she kind of throws a hissy fit about it. But to me, it kind of goes back to the episode where she thought she should have been on Pandora's team and she wasn't putting in the effort that the other queens were putting in. Raven is the so-called ice queen, but Tyra is just a straight-up diva, and it's kind of annoying. And I don't know if she's really like that or if this is the way they edited it, but maybe the other queens did take her idea, but I highly doubt it. Drawing on a mustache or a beard or whatever is, at least to me, going to be the most drastic thing that you can do that is the complete opposite of how these queens normally present themselves. So it doesn't entirely belong to Tyra, but she apparently thinks it does. Anyways, she's super pissed that the queens copied her idea. Once the queens are all in their boy drag, they take photos as if they're next to their drag queen selves. So they're taking a picture of, they're not taking the picture, a photographer's taking a picture of them, and they're pretending like they're standing next to their drag queen selves. And then the drag queen pictures of them will be superimposed or photoshopped in later. Anyways, once they're done with their boy photos, they're back in the workroom working on their bridal bride looks, and they're having deep conversations about marriage. And of course, Tyra Sanchez is just singing horribly, might I add, and being pretty obnoxious, and all the other queens are pretty over her. And in the edit, you can see that they make a really big deal out of this, but we'll get into that later. So the runway category is the perfect bride and groom. The judges are Merle Ginsburg and Santino Rice, the regulars. Guest judge is Matthew Anderson from earlier. And extra special guest judge, singer Martha Wash, who was in the music group CNC Music Factory. Disclaimer, I don't know shit about wedding dresses, so none of what I'm saying is any sort of a critique. I'm just trying to, give you my best description of what I see. First on the runway is Sahara, who chose to do a ballerina-themed wedding dress, or as Ru said, a Swan Lake wedding. So she was in a tutu and walked down the aisle or runway on point, which in ballet terms means she's walking on her tiptoes or dancing on her tiptoes. Martha Wash loved the presentation but didn't like her dress, while Santino said that when she's not on point, it just looked too crafty. And with that said, the pun of the week, I think it was the only pun, goes to Matthew Anderson with "It's too much." Second on the runway was Morgan McMichaels. Morgan came out with a short, the judges called it a La Croix Pouf, P-O-U-F, skirt. It's like a poofy short skirt. They weren't too kind with her dress. Matthew Anderson said it was neither here nor there for him. Santino said it was more of a costume to him than a wedding gown. Tyra also had on a shorter dress, wedding dress. It was really pretty, and she had these white lace cutouts or designs on her right leg that she glued on. The judges loved her whole look and were swooning over her. Martha Wash said she looked like a porcelain doll. Santino said she's so close to perfection. And Matthew Anderson, remember, who loved her makeup earlier, says she's like an old school drag queen, but fresh and new. Raven was fourth on the runway. She described her dress as a cupcake, and I think that's better than I could have done. I really liked her look because instead of white heels like the rest of the queens so far, and Sahara, who came out in ballerina shoes, she had on turquoise heels to match some of the accessories on her dress, like little turquoise bows. I'm proud to say that Santino loved the turquoise accents, and he said that her dress looked the most expensive on the runway. I'm proud because I wrote those notes down before Santino gave his critique. Jessica Wilde was fifth on the runway. I don't really know how to describe it. It was really elegant as well, but I didn't like that she had a sheer shoulder kind of pad or flare only on one side. It wouldn't have helped if it was on both sides either, but the fact that it was on one just made it kind of worse for me. Martha Wash also didn't like the shoulder piece, and Merle didn't like the ruffles and the layers. But Ru did point out how her makeup looked great because she took the advice that Matthew Anderson gave her. I remember now. Santino said that it's like kind of like a quinceañera vibe. And I guess, yeah, if I looked at it, that's kind of what it makes me think of. Sixth on the runway was Tatiana. Her dress probably looked the least like a wedding dress to me, only because it had this kind of weird angular cut in the front. And then on the front, there was a slit that Ru called a slit in front of her no-no hole. I really don't know if she writes this stuff down or if she comes up with it off the top of her head, but it's super clever. Anyway, even Tatiana said that she loved her dress and hated it. Santino said that Tatiana was lucky to have immunity this week because he did not like the look at all. Merle said her face was so killer, but she wanted the clothes to live up to it. While Ru asked Matthew if her outfit was a Xanadu or a Xanadon't, to which Matthew said it's a Xanadon't. Ouch. Pandora Box was seventh. Pandora was the first to come out with a long dress that covered her legs because everybody else that came before her, they were showing a lot of leg. The dress looked like it had a bunch of rose petals all over it. That's the best way I can describe it. Merle Ginsburg loved her dress and said she's having a kind of organza orgasm, while Martha Wash didn't like her dress at all. And Rue noticed that she also took the makeup advice from Matthew Anderson. Jujubee was last on the runway. She was also the only other queen whose dress covered her legs, and it actually reminded me of the dresses I saw growing up. It had a tighter silhouette with the lace designs on it, I guess is how it's described, and she had pearls running down the back of her dress. Merle thinks that the dress drowned Jujubee out a little bit, while Santino said that he's a big fan and that she's just super charming. Rue said that she asked Jujubee to turn up the fire from last week, but she doesn't think she did it. After the runway, the judges reveal the wedding photos of the queens posing with their boy selves. You can see all 8 of them online by searching RuPaul Season 2 wedding photos, because I'm not going to sit here and try to describe it to you guys all. That's just going to be too long of an episode. My favorites, though, were Jujubee, because he looked like he was trying to be a slick husband while the wife didn't want to have anything to do with him. It just looked really funny. Jessica Wilde's was my second favorite because it looked like an actual wedding portrait. And third was Raven because it also looked like an actual wedding photo when they're walking out after the ceremony. Spoiler alert, if you have not watched the episode and don't want to know who wins and who goes home, I suggest you stop here. So this week, after the critiques, Rue says he's having a hard time picking this week and asks the queens if there's anything going on behind the scenes that the judges don't see, and then goes directly to Tatiana. And in the whole episode, they'd been building up to this because they kept showing Tyra singing, and they kept showing Tatiana commenting about it. So Tatiana says that the judges don't see that Tyra is a bitch. Which the rest of the queens kind of gasped, and some weren't surprised. A few thoughts. One, I often wondered if Rue and the production team are watching the footage during the week to purposely dig for material or to pit the queens against each other. And this just solidifies what I thought was going on, which is a yes. I know it's kind of obvious, but still, I don't know what the hell goes on, in a reality show. Second, Tyra, of course, doesn't think she's being a bitch and asked if Morgan and Raven thought so, to which they both said no, which I think they weren't being truthful about. The third thing was, while, the other queens all commented, Jessica Wilde didn't say anything, but Jujubee said she lacks manners, as in Tyra lacks manners. Pandora agreed with Tatiana, and Sahara said that Tyra's sometimes selfish. And then lastly, at one point, Tyra says maybe she'll keep singing next time to make Tatiana have an even uglier dress. I'm paraphrasing here. But there was a lot of drama. Anyway, after all that drama, Rue asks them all to promise to be queens and sends them off to the waiting room. And I'm sure there was a lot of drama there that they didn't show. But the waiting room is called the Illusions Lounge. In the future, they also film this, as in what happens behind the scenes while the judges are deliberating, and present it as a whole different show called Untucked. It's marketing genius. It's shady, but it's genius. So the judges deliberate, and they all agree that Tyra is damn good at being a show queen. And I do like that Merle says this. Merle says that her attitude sucks, and if it was up to Merle Ginsburg, she'd send Tyra home right now. So we'll cut to the chase. The safe queens are Jujubee, Jessica Wilde, Pandora Box, Raven, and Tatiana, because she's got immunity. And the winner of the week is Tyra Sanchez. Congrats to her. Her dress was definitely beautiful, and her photo was fun. But the judges also thought that Raven's outfit was beautiful and that her photo was amazing too. And in the interview, Raven says she should have won that challenge. And I'd have to agree with her. So that means the bottom 2 queens were Sahara Davenport and Morgan McMichaels. They lip sync to Carry On by none other than Martha Wash. So before the lip sync begins, Rue tells the queens that this song Carry On means a lot to him because he listened to the song incessantly after his mom passed away from cancer. And the lyric from the song that Ru used as his anthem was, "Mama said never give up." I want to say that this lip sync had the single most incredible performance so far for the 2 seasons. Sahara Davenport killed it. I wanted to say effing killed it. She brought ballet to her performance while lip syncing. She was on point, again, her tiptoes, and she jumped off of the stage or runway into the splits on the ground. It was insane. I don't know how they don't hit their nuts when they do this. Anyways, Morgan McMichaels did great too, but compared to Sahara Davenport, whew, I would probably say that I vote myself off. So, Shantae, Sahara stays, and Morgan McMichaels sashayed away. That's the end of that episode. These are the things that stood out to me. There's going to be a lot of rambling going on here today. I love how Raven described the Maxi Challenge as combining their feminine and masculine qualities, because societal norms are that if you're a guy, you should only have masculine qualities, and if you're female, you should only have feminine qualities. But I personally think that's closed-minded or limited. Yes, I grew up thinking that, but the world has changed. And I'm glad to see now more than ever that people have also changed their way of thinking. Sure, there are things that are perceived as being masculine or feminine, but I try not to think of it like that anymore. I'm still learning every day, but I don't, give a shit about that anymore. I approach probably from a very basic level, but I continually approach or work on getting rid of my ego so that there is no feminine or masculine. I just like what I like. I do what I do. On the surface level, I love fashion. I love looking good and dressing up. To some, that might be considered being feminine or metrosexual or whatever that shit means. But I can also dress down and get down and dirty. I love listening to love songs, watching rom-coms. I love getting in touch with my emotions, my quote-unquote feminine side. I know it all sounds so basic, but there are plenty of men in my life who don't view it this way. They've got to be masculine all the time, or if you, I don't know, this is such stupid shit that I can't believe we're still talking about nowadays, but if I have a pink drink, they're like, ooh, what are you're having a girl drink? Like, it's just dumb. If I'm doing something that isn't considered masculine, they'll be like, oh, is that gay? Like, it's the dumbest shit in the world. Or if they see a woman doing something perceived as masculine, they're butch or some dumb shit like that. It's just more fluid nowadays, I think. I think that's part of the reason why I welcome folks who are gender fluid. I don't care about any of that. To me, they're getting rid of this notion of this is how things are supposed to be. That thought process to me is bullshit. Blue is for boys, pink is for girls. It's all bullshit. Be who you are as long as you're not hurting yourself or anyone else. Another thing that stood out to me was as the queens were getting ready for their boy drag outfits, Jujubee states that he's not the most masculine, while Raven says that growing up, he would sit and watch his mom put on makeup and wasn't interested at all when his dad was shaving. Tatiana says being in drag allowed him to bring out his feminine side without being judged because often people didn't know he was a boy. Again, I can only relate to things that I know in my life. It makes me think of my cousin Viet, who again has passed away. But he was 6-7 years old when I was a kid. It just was different. But as I got older, I realized he was being effeminate. And he didn't learn that from anybody. That's just how he was born. It's just funny to me that there are these societal expectations of people because of their gender. At the end of the day, none of that matters. What matters is, are they a kind person? Are they a good person? Are they treating you well? That's what should matter. And I guess these two are connected, but as they're taking or getting their photos taken, I can't help but see how much happier these queens all are when they get to be themselves in drag, right? Because to see them as the groom, It's kind of hard to explain, but you see that they're putting on a show or an idea of the quote-unquote masculine man. And Pandora even says she feels like a woman who's dressing up as a drag king. Or Sahara said that there was so much focus on the bride that when it came time to be the boy, she had to figure out which direction to go. So this idea that some people have of the queer community that they're just putting on an act or they choose to be gay. Nah, man, it's in their DNA. It's who they are, and that's perfectly okay. More than perfectly okay. It's amazing to me. I respect it so much because I've said before, how many people, and I don't know the answer to this, obviously, it's rhetorical, how many people are out there who aren't living truthfully? Whether they're still in the closet or they're straight, but they're constantly putting up a facade of who they think the world wants them, to be. And I get that that's so different from person to person, but these queens are being true to themselves, and that's so freeing. It's so inspiring. It inspires me to be my true self every single day. Drag queens aren't just putting on dresses or wigs, they're putting on a superhero outfit or a costume. In the workroom, as the queens are getting ready for their bride looks, they get into a discussion about marriage and who wants to get married and who doesn't. Raven says she doesn't want to get married because she's a bitter bitch. But Morgan says she wants to get married to her boyfriend. And at the time of this airing of this episode, which was in 2010, same-sex marriage was only legal in Massachusetts and didn't become legal in all 50 states until 2015, while Obama was in office, by the way. Shout to Barack Obama. But I want to say that I was so damn glad when it passed. Maggie and I weren't planning to get married, mostly because of me, but partially because we also didn't see a need for it. But also partially because we just thought that if gay folks couldn't do it, then we couldn't either. But when it became legal, I just was really happy for all the queer folks out there. And eventually, Maggie and I also got engaged in 2015. Coincidence? I think not. And eventually, we got married in 2017. Long story, I know, but here's my thought. Long before gay marriage was legalized, marriage between a man and a woman was already suffering from a 50% divorce rate or some crazy stat like that. So this idea that allowing gay folks to get married would somehow destroy the sanctity of marriage was just complete bullshit. Such a cop-out. Because as they continued to talk about, as the queens in the workroom continued to talk about this amongst each other, some of them weren't really sure if their family would be supportive or not. And that just sucks. Instead of worrying about whether the partner is good to them, kind to them, is a good human being, and all the shit that matters, a lot of families are worried that it's a same-sex marriage or what others would say or what their church would say. But the hard truth is that anyone's marriage doesn't have any sort of impact on their lives whatsoever, as in other people's lives. It only affects you and your loved one or your significant other. And if it affects, your family members or your friends negatively, then those friends and family should take a long, hard look at themselves, because ultimately marriage shouldn't affect anyone but the two people who are getting married. And I'm speaking from experience here. People had ideas of where we should get married, why we should get married, blah, 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 blah. But we put our we put our feet down and did it for us, no one else. And I'm so damn happy that all the queer folks out there who found someone special can do the same. I'm happy they also have the right, just like anyone else, to get married. It's their right. And of course, now with the right-wing Supreme Court, that can potentially be overturned, just like they overturned Roe v. Wade. 2024, y'all, be sure to go vote. Even though Tyra won and deserved, to win for her look, I agree with Raven that Raven should have won. I just want to point out that this is probably one of the reasons why I have a gag reflex when I think of most reality shows, because as much as I love RuPaul's Drag Race, it feels like shitty and rude behavior is rewarded. And it's not exclusive to Tyra. And again, this isn't about making Tyra out to be a quote unquote bitch or anything. Yeah, her attitude stinks, but I think it speaks to a broader problem. Even in the acting world where I'm from, I've worked with some people who are amazing, but I've also worked with people who aren't the nicest people. I've heard stories about actors, lead actors, and actresses on films and TV sets who are the worst, yet they continue to work. And I'm not trying to solve anything here on Straight Guy Queer Eye, but man, coming up in the entertainment world, I'm constantly told to be kind, not to be rude, all that stuff. And of course I will be, because like Jujubee said, it's about manners. It's about being a good human being. So I work really hard to be kind in my own life. I wasn't always, but as an adult, I try really hard to be. But when you see people with bad attitudes get away with bad things, it's kind of demoralizing. It makes me wonder if being rude and being a dick would get me further. But then I realize, and I know this is so obvious, but I realize maybe it'll get me far, or those people far, but for how long? And if for a long time, will anybody truly respect me? Will I respect myself? If not, and they don't care, then all good. But that says more about you than it does about anyone else. I couldn't live with myself if that was the case. I couldn't imagine being a shitty person. I just hate myself too much if I did that. Just food for thought. And Carry On by Martha Wash isn't a song I've ever really listened to, but that lyric, Mama said never give up. Whatever it is you're doing in your life that you are passionate about, if you're happy doing it and you're not harming yourself or anyone else, never give up. If you are enjoying Straight Guy Queer Eye, please share it with 5 people you know. Give it a rating on your podcast app. You can also follow Straight Guy Queer Eye on Instagram at SGQE Podcast. You can follow me on my personal Instagram at Hello Paul Yen. I'd love to hear from you, so please send comments, suggestions, and feedback to sgqepodcast@gmail.com. Remember, be human, be kind.